Welcome back to Watch the Bookerman and to the 9th episode of Paul Heyman's TNA 2010. We're just off the back of Against All Odds, and I think that the episode after the pay-per-view is the most important episode you'll do all month. I don't know if I've said that before in this series. The go-home show, of course, is a big one, but the one after that sets the momentum and sets the tone for the next month, the build to the next pay-per-view, I think is always really, really important. We're in the Impact Zone, of course, and I think that this show is a great example of just that, what I said. It's bookended particularly by two significant moments. I think the way we start the show and the way we end the show, really good in terms of the build to Destination X. And with that said, let's get into this episode for tonight. We forgo the usual video package to recap what happened at the pay-per-view, as Kurt Angle's music is the first thing we hear as TNA Impact starts. The commentators put over his victory Against All Odds on Sunday, Angle then taking a microphone and cutting a promo saying that he's feeling great tonight, having made Anderson tap out in the middle of the ring. He's feeling fresh, he's feeling young, he's feeling hungry, he's feeling like he's got a hell of a lot left in the tank, and he spoke to Paul Heyman earlier this week and told him not only is Kurt Angle not going anywhere, Heyman better find him an opponent to kick off Impact. Angle says that his challenge was open to anybody, he doesn't care, as long as Paul Heyman gives him the competition he deserves here in TNA. So a good segment to open the show, an 81 rated promo from Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle looked good, he was superb improvising without a script. Perfect start to the show as we go into the debut of Roderick Strong here in TNA. He gets a great rating for his gimmick, the legitimate athlete, which I think is a pretty good, accurate for what we're going to do with him. He's not, sounds like a negative to say so soon into his run, but Roderick Strong's not somebody who's ever had much of a defined character. I don't know if that's a bit unfair to say. He's very much got by on how excellent he is in the ring, and this match is no different. It's only a 53. He's not that well known in the Southeast, so we can see why he's considerably below Kurt Angle, and being behind Kurt Angle, it's not a criticism of Roderick Strong to be so far behind the best wrestler in the world. And it's 15 minutes, but Kurt Angle picks up a pinfall victory over Roderick Strong. It's a debut defeat, but going 15 minutes with Kurt Angle, he looks absolutely excellent, going step for step with him, and it is a strong victory for Kurt Angle as well, who overcomes the young, hungry upstart. Kurt Angle encourages the fans to give it up for Roderick Strong in his debut. We're really wanting to try and put over that Roderick Strong took him to his limit. When Roddy gets back to his feet, Angle offers a handshake to the newcomer, giving him his seal of approval, and Roderick Strong, of course, accepts, confirming that he's going to be a babyface in the company, and the commentators put over that he went step for step, move for move, toe to toe with Kurt Angle for over 15 minutes. Strong then leaves the ring, but as he heads up the ramp, he is jumped on his first night in the company by Mr. Anderson, an extension of the Angle Mr. Anderson storyline. The attack is brief as Kurt Angle quickly leaves the ring to try and run Anderson off. Mr. Anderson gets away and Kurt checks on Roderick Strong, so continuing the tensions between them, and we can also have a match in between Mr. Anderson versus Roderick Strong. So a good, solid start to the show. Really happy with that match and the two segments surrounding it. Very, very good, and I think, like I said, that is a good way to start the next cycle of shows. And in the back, we get Homicide confronting Samoa Joe about Against All Odds, asking him how he could team up with Pope after everything Homicide said. Samoa Joe fires back at Homicide, asking him where the hell he was on Sunday. How can he come here and question Samoa Joe's actions when he didn't even turn up to the pay-per-view? What was Joe supposed to do? Turn down the backup and get beaten down? Homicide avoids that question, but says that Joe is going to want to listen to what he has to say tonight. Homicide's going to the ring to expose D'Angelo De Niro, and he expects an apology from Samoa Joe when he learns the truth. Homicide not doing well with that script, but he does gain heat to the storyline between Homicide and Pope. A 60 rated segment is pretty good. Could have been better with Homicide improvising better, but I'm not going to complain about that because it is more of a setup for a later segment, so not too important. And we go back to the commentators, but they're saying there is no time. It's like we're trying to put across that we're trying to schedule in an Against All Odds recap. We normally show stills at the start. There's just not time. There's so much going on tonight that the only way that you're going to see what happened at Against All Odds is to order the replay. We're telling the viewer that the only way to find out about it is to go and see that pay-per-view. We then go into a sit-down interview. Mike Tenay is questioning Kazarian. I said that I'd do this a few weeks ago, and we get the new X Division champion. He is with his wife Tracy Brooks and Tomko, and Kaz says that TNA's known him for years. He's known how much TNA means to Kazarian, but 2 years ago, the pressure of that, of wanting to please the fans, got too much for him. He lost to Kurt Angle in a World Heavyweight title match, and then he was so in his head that he cost Team TNA the World X Cup. He fell out of love with wrestling, his passion faded, so Kazarian left TNA. But he still had his fiancée, he still had a house, he still had bills to pay, and he still had to make ends meet somehow. So he returned, but he couldn't face the people, he couldn't go back on what he'd said, everything he said he still stood by, so he became Suicide. And the TNA fans loved that persona, perhaps even more than they'd ever loved Kazarian, and he admits that hurt him a little bit. As much as he enjoyed the adulation, as much as he was happy to become the X Division champion again, he wondered, would anybody ever miss Kazarian? TNA presses him a bit more. He's asking him about Suicide, why that character came to be, why he chose that particular persona. But Amazing Red crashes the interview set. He shouldn't have been able to get on there. He's obviously bypassed some kind of security, but Tomko stands in Red's way. Red is not getting to Kazarian, but he's not happy with the setup from Against All Odds. Tracy Brooks distracting him, Kazarian attacking him from behind, and in a moment of rage, Red did challenge Kazarian to that match, accepted the challenge. We have to say it was a very, very unfair situation that Amazing Red found himself in. It's a okay rated segment, and Kazarian says that he's done with the interview after that. It's put him off Amazing Red getting involved, and he's going to talk in his own time about what the Suicide character was about. So I wanted to do a bit more with that segment. I really want to go into the psychology of Kazarian and his time with Suicide, and the fact that, well, I'll get to that when I actually do the segment. There's going to be a part 2 of this Kazarian interview, and hopefully it won't be interrupted this time. And we go into the second match of the night. Generation Me picked up a victory over the Hooligans, Brian Kendrick and Paul London, at the pay-per-view. But this time, Brian Kendrick beats Matt Jackson in 7 minutes and 31 with a quick roll-up. I actually think I set a distraction. Forgot to put the distraction in, but Paul London was at ringside, as was Nick Jackson, and London maybe distracting Matt Jackson a little bit, not enough that it's got a note apparently, but Brian Kendrick picks up the win, and it's a fast roll up, maybe with a handful of tights. The idea being that they've got a little bit lucky, and Paul London and Brian Kendrick continuing to show a little bit of an obnoxious side to their characters. Brian Kendrick and Matt Jackson having great chemistry. Kendrick getting better at his gimmick, so good things there. Matt Jackson actually doing better than Brian Kendrick, perhaps because it was a high spots based match, but 2 good performances. And after the match, Paul London joins Brian Kendrick in the ring. The pair are clearly relieved to get one over on the team who beat them Against All Odds. Their tactics during the match had been questionable, not stemming over to actually outright cheating, but taking advantage where they could. The Hooligans delighted to get back to winning ways, while Generation Me understandably had a little bit of an issue with the way they'd behaved. We've not gone fully Brian Kendrick and Paul London heel. They've not done any like dastardly attacks or anything too bad, but they're just acting like dicks basically is what we're going with for their characters at the minute. And we'll see how that develops as they continue to seem to struggle with this younger generation. They were once the upcoming fast rising stars, the darlings of the independent scene, things like that. So we're showing that there's a little bit of bitterness to their characters, like I've said previously. As we go into a backstage segment, Lacey Von Erich, Madison Rayne and Velvet Sky are talking, and they seem to be in pretty high spirits ahead of their match later tonight. But when Angelina Love walks into the room, things change. The demeanour changes of all three. They all go quiet. Love doesn't understand why they've stopped talking, but turns to Lacey and calls her out on the failure at Against All Odds. Love says she's not even angry at Lacey Von Erich, but she's disappointed in her. She thought Lacey was better than that. But tonight, they've got to focus on earning Angelina Love another shot at the title, and that means them winning tonight. Love says that the best way for her to get another shot is to pin Tara, and their whole game plan will be around making that happen tonight. If they don't win, Lacey is going to be kicked out of the Beautiful People, while Madison Rayne and Velvet Sky clearly don't agree with this. They don't speak up. There's very much a manipulation going on with Angelina Love. She's the leader of the group and is being really unfair to Lacey Von Erich, really, because it wasn't her fault, really. It was her fault in the Knockouts Championship match because she did botch the interference, but the fact that Love isn't capable of beating Tara without needing help shouldn't really reflect badly on Lacey Von Erich, but it is. We then get a promo from Jimmy Jacobs, and again it's a little bit better than his initial promos, but not at the level we need it to be. He does improvise well, and it's advancing 2 storylines actually because of the subject of the promo, and it was recorded earlier in the day actually. Jimmy Jacobs is seen with Awesome Kong and Hamada. They stand in the middle of the ring, but it's before anybody's arrived at the building, so it's an empty building. The lights are down, and it's a very different scene to what we're used to seeing from the Impact Zone. Around the ring, the final touches are being put to the preparation for the night's broadcast. Jimmy Jacobs says that tonight 8 knockouts will team together and their personal issues will play out for everybody to see. But Kong and Hamada, they've stayed out of that, and they stand on an island of their own, the most dominant force in TNA today. And he sees no challengers who feasibly have a chance to take the Knockouts Tag Team Championships from them. They're on the outside looking in at the moment, and Jacobs warns that if they don't find any challengers in TNA, then Hamada or Awesome Kong might have to come for Tara. So teasing that we might have a champion v champion feud bubbling, but it's really just to get Jimmy Jacobs and the tag team champions on screen as we go into that 8-woman tag team match. And it's a victory for the beautiful people. Angelina Love beating Tara after hitting her with the nightstick that Lacey Von Erich carries with her. We notice that ODB doesn't return to the ring. ODB's on the apron. Let's say that Madison Rayne and Velvet Sky and Sarita and Taylor Wilde have neutralized each other, so they're not involved. That means that ODB is on the apron. She could come in to try and break up the fall, but doesn't, and Tara is pinned by Angelina Love. Another decent match, 56 rating. Tara standing out as the best performer, ODB just below her, Angelina Love better than ODB. That's pretty much how it always is. Everybody seemed to be on their game, nobody particularly lower than you'd expect, but the match got the crowd hotter, so a good way to end the first hour with Angelina Love just having pinned the Knockouts champion. She once again singles out Lacey Von Erich, demanding that she comes into the ring and raises her arm. Lacey looks a little bit reluctant, but does exactly what she's told. It's clear that Lacey, like the rest of the group a little bit, fears Angelina. Madison and Velvet are holding back, watching the situation unfold. We're trying to build some sympathy on Lacey Von Erich. Angelina Love very much the heel in this scenario, and I probably should be putting that we're teasing a Lacey Von Erich face turn, so that's something to think about for the next shows coming through, because I do think that that's the logical conclusion to this. Returning to the second hour of the show, Mauro and Taz switch gears a little bit to talk about the attack on the Motor City Machine Guns by Team 3D at Against All Odds. Footage is shown of Team 3D making their first appearances in the Impact Zone in 2010, taking down Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin with a pair of 3Ds through a table each, after the tag team champions had just won a hard-fought match against Hernandez and Matt Morgan. That was a long sentence. Later tonight, Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin will address that attack. That is just a brief segment to put that over before Homicide comes out to the ring and grabs a microphone. We're kind of giving it an impromptu feeling, not that he's requested microphone time, just that he's come out, grabbed a mic, and he's taking charge of the situation. He cuts a promo explaining why he jumped D'Angelo De Niro. He says that he watched those videos that the Pope did claiming the streets, and it made him sick to see that. He says that Heyman, Dixie, whoever, they can punish him for not showing up on Sunday, but what he does to the Pope, whatever he does to the Pope, is entirely justified. Homicide talks about his struggles in life and says that TNA billing this guy from the streets of Harlem is a slap in the face to anybody who really grew up in that situation. He claims that D'Angelo De Niro grew up in Florida. He gets some cheap heat by dissing the state that we're filming this show in, and his whole story is phony. More than being a liar, he is an enemy of those streets because before he was a wrestler, D'Angelo De Niro was a cop. Homicide says that his nickname wasn't always the Gringo Killer, and as far as he's concerned, that makes De Niro an enemy for life. The Pope comes out to answer these claims, and he is fired up by the words of Homicide. He says that Homicide knows nothing about who he is or where he comes from, and next week he's going to show Homicide just how real the Pope is. Homicide is ready to fight him right now, but De Niro says that he'll face him next week in the ring in a sanctioned match. So the Pope showing, normally he's this cool laid back character. Ever since he's been in TNA, he's had that character of being a little bit above everything and being cool and calm and in control of the situation, but we're seeing here something different from the Pope. Homicide bringing a bit of fire out of D'Angelo De Niro. He's not been a face for very long in TNA at this point, but he's very much showing that he is not going to back down to the words of Homicide, and I think that's going to be a really good clash of styles next week, and hopefully we can bring a bit more grit out of D'Angelo De Niro in that match. And of course, he didn't really answer the claims of Homicide about the kind of person that he is and whether his backstory is a load of BS. So a lot more to go with this storyline, but for now we have a match set up for next week. As we move then into the fourth match of the night, Mick Foley comes out to join commentary, and he's saying that he's been thinking a lot about his place in TNA this week, especially after his words with Heyman at Against All Odds, and he wants to come and share some of his thoughts with the people. He says that he hasn't formulated anything in terms of an official announcement yet. That'll come in time, but he thinks that a chat with Mauro and Taz and an honest discussion where he lays out his feelings to the fans is exactly what he needs at this time. So Mick Foley doing well there, a 68 rated segment. It was only 1 minute because it was just setting up the fact that he'll be on commentary for the second hour, and we go then into the fourth match of the night, and Desmond Wolfe picks up a dominant, decisive victory over Austin Creed, a Tower of London in 6 minutes and 21, and he's pretty much, I don't know if I did decisive or I've put Austin Creed to dominate. What an idiot. Yeah, that's a massive oversight because that's just completely changes the match. But yeah, it is a decisive win for Wolfe. I'm just going to ignore that mistake that I made. He's coming out of the pay-per-view very, very angry and upset, so I could explain it away as being that he's just completely off his game throughout the night and making mistakes, and that's how Creed seems to be in control until Wolfe can take control and pick up a decisive win. Yeah, I really don't... I make these mistakes quite regularly, so it's really frustrating, but it's a good performance from Desmond Wolfe. Not so good from Austin Creed, and it's a shame to have Austin Creed lose again, but I really wanted to bring out, and the point of this match before I made that mistake was that Desmond Wolfe absolutely dominates him, and was showing that after that loss to AJ, he's very much still focused, and perhaps even more focused than he ever has been. And after the match, he stands over Austin Creed. Mick Foley, I meant to mention during the commentary, as he's talking about his future, he also has a few, not shots at Desmond Wolfe, but he doesn't like his approach, the fact that he's, pulling the hair and gouging the eyes and sort of bending the rules wherever he can. And he says that despite that, after the match, he's saying that even though he doesn't necessarily like his approach, he's one of the toughest guys that he's ever seen in TNA. Wolfe stands over Creed, who he decisively defeats, although not dominates, and stays there until Lethal comes in and tells him to back off. There's no need for this. After the match, Wolfe stares down Lethal, who he had issues with. I booked a little mini storyline between Jay Lethal and Desmond Wolfe in the 2009 prelude to the Heyman era series that I did on TEW 2016, so it's a little bit of a callback to that, but Wolfe just shoves past Jay Lethal. In the ring, Lethal checks on Creed, who is feeling the effects of the brutal offense of Desmond Wolfe, and a decisive victory for him as we go into the commercial break. But we come back and it's just Mauro and Taz at ringside, and they note that Mick Foley is now not with us anymore, despite him having just sat down to discuss his future. They show footage from during the break as to why this happened. Desmond Wolfe confronted Mick Foley, they get into a heated discussion, Wolfe seemingly taking issues with Mick Foley's words in that promo that he cut before the main event at Against All Odds. Taz says that Wolfe was clearly just lashing out, unhappy with how things had gone at the pay-per-view, and Foley happened to be the first person he came across, and he really took it out on him. Foley got fired up. We know that Foley's one of the best people at bringing that fire out of himself, and he told Desmond Wolfe that he better watch his mouth. Foley has not been active in the ring for the last couple of months, but he looks close to tipping over the edge and maybe even lashing out at Desmond Wolfe, but he decides to remove himself from the situation, heading up the back before anything else could happen. This is just a case of Wolfe being a little bit too emotional about what happened, and of course we know that Foley, like I said, he's so good at that burst of aggression that he can do where he can take his speech up to another level, and I don't think there's many people who can show that range that Mick Foley does. I'm a huge fan of Foley, especially his promos, and I think that just doing a little bit of a thing between him and Wolfe will help Wolfe's perception, and that's going to develop over the next weeks. And we get, I didn't think about that, the match the crowd don't like having people who they don't have any investment in, but we're trying to build up Alissa Flash. I don't know if that will hurt her in terms of getting over, but again, she's putting in good performances. She's had another singles match where I got this note and she did really well, but is let down by not being that well known, which is a completely fair response to the fact that these two haven't really been featured very much at all. But it's a decisive victory, albeit 6.5 minutes, so it's not a complete squash, but Flash picks up the win and is joined by Daphne, the victor standing tall, and it does appear that Daphne is now following the advice of Flash from a couple of weeks ago and will stand behind her and not beside her in this alliance. Flash told Daphne that she was essentially letting her down when they were working as a tag team, so now Daphne is the ringside manager of Flash, and Flash is the one going for singles gold, or certainly looking to establish herself in that division. Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin then come down to the ring, and Sabin says that first things first, they just want everybody to know they're still the World Tag Team Champions. They don't want that to get lost in all of this with Team 3D, and they put over the challenge that Hernandez and Matt Morgan put in. They don't want that great match to be overshadowed, but they do have to address Team 3D. Alex Shelley says that they've faced Devon and Ray before, they've won some of those matches, and they've lost some. They've been put through tables before, but Sunday was a little bit different because the dynamic has changed. This wasn't Shelley and Sabin punching up, doing whatever it took to try and get noticed in TNA. This is a different TNA. In this TNA, Team 3D are the ones trying to prove they belong. That is all the proof that the Motor City Machine Guns needed to say that the landscape of TNA has changed just in the space of 2 months. This is their tag team division now, and Team 3D are the ones on the outside looking in, and they're the ones who need to prove that they can hang with the best tag team in the world. Sabin says that they'll get the chance to do exactly that because the Motor City Machine Guns aren't going to play any games with them. They spoke to Paul Heyman and they made it clear. They want Team 3D here next week for a tables match for the TNA World Tag Team titles. So it's not a particularly good promo from the Motor City Machine Guns. I've said before, their in-ring work is certainly their strength, and their promos, I can't remember any particularly great promos from either of them. Alex Shelley did one in Ring of Honor actually that was pretty decent quite recently, but moreover, they were in-ring guys, especially at this time in their career, and they're setting up a match against Team 3D. It does lose heat to the storyline, unfortunately, but I do think that'll be a good match. Sabin and Shelley versus Team 3D, World Tag Team titles in a tables match next week. So we have brought Brother Ray and Brother Devon back into the fold, and straight into a tag team titles match. It's going to be on Impact, it's not going to be built to a pay-per-view, and I do think that this will be a great match for further getting over the Motor City Machine Guns. Not to spoil the result, but of course, I don't want to spoil the result. We then go into the main event. AJ Styles and Samoa Joe defeating Kazarian and Daniels in 15 minutes and 40. During the match, Kazarian is on the outside and AJ Styles, I'm thinking maybe a phenomenal forearm from in the ring to the outside. We want it to be a big collision between them. Maybe even they have a clash of heads as they collide on the outside, because we want it to remain as Samoa Joe and Daniels left in the ring, because finally Samoa Joe gets his decisive victory over Daniels. He's been in a feud with him all year, but it's either been Joe pinning Tomko or Daniels beating Joe or other people being involved in the fall. So we wanted to get that final moment of retribution for Samoa Joe, who has been tormented by Daniels throughout the entire year, and the Kakina clutch and a tap out gets us that. It's a really good main event, 79 rating. I think that'll be like the second or third best match we've done. I can't think of any other matches other than, well, Anderson and Kurt at the pay-per-view and AJ and Kurt at the other pay-per-view, but a really, really good main event, considering it's got 4 TNA Originals in it, guys who we, like I've said, want to build this company around. Kazarian a little bit below, and as the X-Division champion, it's a shame that he loses the first match that he's involved in, but it is him and the world champion who just clash heads on the outside of the ring, leaving it to be Joe picking up a win over Daniels. Continuing 2 storylines, the match deserved better announcing, but we did get the crowd buzzing as we go into this final segment of the show. Oh, Kaz got a new high spot, that's pretty cool. His psychology helped. Yeah, so that's a really good positive thing to come out of that, and his psychology will gain some points now, I think. But, like I said, this final segment. After the match, Samoa Joe stands tall alone in the ring. He's arm raised by Brian Hebner, and he is handed his Feast or Fire briefcase. Joe leaves the ring, having finally got his decisive fall over Daniels, like I said, but stops on the ramp when he spots AJ Styles is still down from that collision. Joe looks at AJ, then to the case, and back to AJ. He puts the case on the canvas and picks AJ Styles up from the ground. Joe then rolls Styles into the ring and helps the slumped Styles back to his feet. Myro questions if Joe is really about to do what they think he's going to do. Samoa Joe hands his Feast or Fired briefcase to Brian Hebner just days after AJ Styles was in that hard-fought match against Desmond Wolfe at the pay-per-view, and he tells him to keep a hold of this. Brian Hebner's just as confused as everybody else, including AJ, who's sort of coming round now. Joe's helped him to his feet, but AJ's still feeling the effects of that match. But Samoa Joe grabs AJ by the face and makes sure that he is looking him in the eyes. Joe says that I told you I was going to do this. At Destination X, I'm taking my world title shot. Joe then leaves the ring, AJ Styles holding his neck, still in severe pain from what happened during the main event, and sort of asks Brian Hebner what's going on. He kind of isn't all there. Taz suggests that AJ Styles just had a very, very lucky escape. He was there for the taking for Samoa Joe, but things could very much change at Destination X because the main event for that show is set. AJ Styles will defend the championship as Samoa Joe invokes his Feast or Fired World Heavyweight Championship match. So despite a good start to the show and a good end to the show, how good was the start? A really good start to the show and a strong end to the show. It is only a 64, that's very much the range we're in, but it is increasing our popularity in 30 regions, and I'm really pleased with that show overall. I think, like I said, it was bookended by two significant things. Roderick Strong coming in with a great gimmick and a solid debut match. A 53 isn't particularly great, but there's no question that he's had a very, very good start to his TNA career, going 15 minutes with Kurt Angle. I don't think that there's a problem with somebody losing their debut match. I think it's absolutely fine for somebody to come in and lose to an established name. Not to draw parallels, but there was a little bit of a, like when John Cena showed up against Kurt Angle's open challenge, it was a little bit going into that. Kazarian wowing fans debuting the new spot. It's cool to see that kind of news story. Alissa Flash is doing well, according to Scott D'Amore. That's good to see considering we want to push her. So two people really impressed with what we've seen from Alissa Flash. So despite her not having that recognition, it is showing that we're very much making the right decisions. We got over 1 million, back over 1 million for the post pay-per-view show. And SoCal Val signs her new contract. I'm really happy with how that's gone, and I'm really looking forward to Destination X continuing the build to that. We've had a debut in Roderick Strong this week, and we've got a vignette to hype up another debut next week. I do want to get a settled roster eventually, but for now there's still people who I want to bring in to continue to shape this roster. But I think seeing AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, Daniels, Kazarian in the main event, I think seeing Roderick Strong coming in, Desmond Wolfe, while getting into a little bit of a storyline with Mick Foley, the Motor City Machine Guns, even Amazing Red and Kazarian. There's some great things going on with the TNA homegrown guys, and I'm really happy with how this whole process is going at the minute. And the more we get into it, I think the better this show is going to get. We want to be pushing those 70, 80, even higher ratings, and hopefully Joe AJ Styles can be exactly that at Destination X.